Heavenly Father, Lord, what a week it has been for all of us to have reached this point, to have this moment where we can be joined to you through the Word, through your Spirit. Bless our time together. Increase our understanding and our confidence and our hope in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. It always happens. Every time I get on the road, the interstate, and I see a police officer, I do one of two things. I let my foot off the gas, and I check my speed. And I watch as everybody else does the same thing too. What is it about the presence of law enforcement that causes us to sit up straight, check our seatbelt, check our speed, and do all of this? What is it? Am I the only one who reacts this way in the presence of law enforcement?
It's accountability.
It's accountability. Okay, interesting. In fact, I'm even more impressed when you encounter law enforcement on the road and nobody wants to pass them. And they may be driving under the speed limit. Then you get that one brave soul creeping up, and then, oh, it's okay to pass. Okay, all right.
Oh, that's me. I'm that brave soul.
You're that brave soul. You are the one. Okay.
I know that. I just set it at 4 miles above and I just go.
Okay,
And I've
all right.
never got pulled over.
All right. They must just laugh when they slow down and nobody wants to pass them. They have this insane authority. And they have the power. They have power, they have responsibility, they have authority. And the way it affects me and the way it affects all of you is, well, it's amazing. How much more when the presence of Jesus is in our lives? Then you stay under the speed limit. Okay, all right. Well, let's look at the reaction people had when Jesus came into the temple. He did it more than once. He did it on a regular basis, but in this particular instance, things were different. Turn to Luke 19. Luke 19, verse 45. When Jesus entered the temple courts, he began to drive out those who were selling. "It is written," he said to them, "My house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." His mood, his appearance, his visage was different. It had become a way of life to exchange currency in the temple, because the temple had its own currency, and there was extortion going on as people were diligently trying to obtain their proper sacrifice for the sacrifices they were doing in order to have their sins forgiven. The whole place had become a money-making racket that abused people who were desperately trying to receive forgiveness. And Jesus knew this was going on. And like the divine lawgiver, this wasn't just law enforcement. This was God himself entered the place. And as we read the words, he began to drive them out. What kind of power does... the Bible says he has no beauty that we should desire him. What was it that changed in his appearance that caused everybody to run for fear, run for dear life? It was something about his divinity that sinners cannot stand in the presence of a holy God. And his divinity was flashing through his humanity. And as he said those words, condemnation sprang up in their hearts as they knew what they were doing were wrong. They knew it. And just as we check our speedometers, we check our meters when we come in contact with law enforcement who has the power to pull us over, who has the power to check us out, there they were with divine law enforcing right there in their presence as the lawgiver himself. And they had no choice. They ran. And maybe some of them didn't even know completely why they were running. And then they heard his words, "My house will be a house of prayer, but you made it a den of robbers." Every day he was teaching at the temple. But the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the leaders among the people were trying to kill him. Yet they could not find any way to do it because all the people hung on his words. Everything he said made sense, brought life, gave light to their darkened understanding. And they had to get more. They couldn't get enough. And the leaders who were trying to hold on to their way of life, they were trying to stop this from happening. Influence was leaving them and going to this. He didn't even go through the Sanhedrin. Where did this guy come from? How does he speak with such authority? Who gave him that power? And when we look at chapter 20, it continues. One day as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple courts and proclaiming the good news. Not bad news, the good news. The chief priests and the teachers of the law, together with the elders, came up to him. It's like their ears were stopped up. They wouldn't even take the time to listen to what he was saying. They had one goal in mind, one track mind, agenda. They had this one thing that they had to get off their chest. They had to find out, what is it that makes this guy have so much power? And so they approached him. Tell us. Tell us by what authority you are doing these things. They said, who gave you this authority? What is the source of your power? Because they know everything that he had done. The miracles, the power over demons, the feeding the multitudes with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. There is nobody else like this man. And yet with all the identifying marks, they refused to acknowledge that this could be the one they had been waiting for. But no, they considered him as a threat. And so stopping up their ears to the truth, they wanted to find out. They wanted to trap him. Just break one of our laws. Who gave you this authority? Did you know the scientific community is asking a similar question today? They want to know the source of something in particular. And now this is, I have to prime you for this because this is an article from Newsweek, U.S. edition, and Tech and Science. Okay? And the headline reads like this: the universe should not actually exist. Did you hear that? The universe should not actually exist. The CERN scientists discovered. The universe as we know it should not exist. This is by Hannah Osborne. Dated October 25, 2017. 9:11 a.m. Okay. After performing the most precise experiments on antiprotons that have ever been carried out, researchers have discovered a symmetry in nature that they say just shouldn't be possible. Symmetry in nature should be impossible. That's their claim. One of the big questions about the universe is how the first matter formed after the Big Bang. All right, now this is the foundation they're building on. Because particles and antiparticles, All right. Particle, antiparticle. I know we have teachers in our midst. You have a number line you've been teaching your students. What happens when you add 5 and negative 5? What do you get?
0.
0. That's called annihilation. 10 and negative 10. What do you get? 0. Annihilation. That's the principle that they're demonstrating here, that particle and antiparticle, when they join together, you get annihilation. Okay. All right. So because particles and antiparticles annihilate one another when they come into contact, if there were exactly equal measures of both, the universe would not exist. We'd be a big 0. At least not in the form we see it today. As such, there must be, and this is the word they use, an imbalance between particles and antiparticles, even if it is only by the tiniest fraction. But this is not the case. All experiments designed to find this asymmetry have come up blank. This is also true of the latest, which were recently carried out at CERN by an international team of researchers. And they quote, "All of our observations find a complete symmetry between matter and antimatter, which is why the universe should not actually exist. You should not be here." All right. In the study, researchers used antiprotons that had been isolated in 2015. The antiprotons, which are created, by the way, at an incredible cost of energy. All right, they're very rare. All right, I had to add that in because I did some additional research. So, antiprotons were measured using the interaction of two traps that use electrical and magnetic fields to capture them. The team was able to measure the magnetic force of the antiproton to a level that is 350 times more precise than before. If there was an imbalance between protons and antiprotons, this level of precision would be the best bet for finding it, to finding an imbalance, to finding asymmetry. At its core, the question is whether the antiproton has the same magnetism as a proton. This is the riddle we need to solve. The measurement of antiprotons was extremely difficult, and we had been working on it for 10 years. The final breakthrough came with the revolutionary idea of performing the measurement with two particles. After finding no asymmetry between particles and antiparticles, the researchers will now work to develop even greater sensitivity in equipment. So this is how the article ends. An asymmetry must exist here, somewhere, but we simply do not understand where the difference is. And they end with a question. What is the source of the symmetry break? What is the source of the symmetry break? Now, I had to read this many times in order to get some sense of understanding of this. Symmetry means annihilation. All right? Go to Genesis 1, verse 1. Actually, Genesis 1, verse 2. Genesis 1, verse 2, not Genesis 1, verse 1. And what does it say there?
And the earth was without form and void.
That's
and
right.
Darkness,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
All right. I'm going to read it to you again in a different version. Now, the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. All right. So this earth was formless. You know what this earth was?
It was nothing.
A 0. This earth was nothing. In verse 1, it says here, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. According to this scientific article, who introduced the asymmetry? God did. Yeah. They're searching for a source of the asymmetry. They can't find it. And here, right at the beginning of the book, right at the beginning, we find, using their language, that God was the source of the asymmetry. Since symmetry is nothingness, matter and antimatter in equal amounts equals annihilation. Yet we're here. What is the source of the breaking of symmetry? God is. Yeah. And look at another verse. Hebrews 11, 1-3. Now faith is the confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe, does your Bible say universe? Worlds, okay. That the worlds or the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So the universe, which scientists say should be annihilated, should be nothing, was formed out of nothing. Yeah, isn't that fascinating? Isn't that amazing? That God, what we in our feeble humanity describe as asymmetry, He introduced the asymmetry into nothing to make who we are. To make the observable universe. Matthew 11, verse 27. Look at that. Matthew 11. It says here, all things have been committed to me by my Father. Yes, these are Jesus' words. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. All things, all power on heaven and earth. Turn to Matthew 28, verse 18.
28:18.
Yeah. 28, verse 18. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. That Greek word for authority and power is the same word, exousia. So when you see power, it's exousia. When you see authority, it's exousia. It's the same thing. It's the same word. Jesus is the source of the asymmetry. He is the power. Now, when you go back to Luke 20, and you finish that part of the story, they say, who gave you this authority? With what authority are you doing these things? And of course, this is hot off the heels of him exercising his divinity as he spoke, as he reprimanded those who were cheating others in the temple. Here they have their little committee come to approach him, wanting to get from him a direct answer. How foolish. When the author of all creation was right there in their midst. He replied to them, I will also ask you a question. Tell me, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? And so they discussed it among themselves and said, if we say from heaven, he will ask, why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, all the people will stone us because they are persuaded that John was a prophet. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. How are they going to answer? If we say from heaven, well, why didn't you believe? If we say from man, well, John was a prophet. Everybody believed John was a prophet. Now, they have to answer this. Jesus asked them this for them to consider what they believe. And because they were assembled as a group, nobody had the courage to stand out and say what they believed. They had to conform to the group. Because it says here in verse 7, they answered, "We don't know where it was from." And these are the smartest, supposed to be the smartest people representing the Jews. These are the highest learned minds. And Jesus is asking them such a basic question. We don't know. Let me ask you, do you know why you're here? You know, we consider a book like this, right? Is this book from God? Or is it from man? See, if you say from God, then I'm going to say, why aren't you following it? And then you say, if it's from man, well then, what are we doing here? I just finished reading an article to you from the scientific community who are baffled that this asymmetry that they're observing, they can't observe the asymmetry. All they observe is symmetry. So a power had to be introduced in order for an asymmetry to be present, and they can't find it. What was the source? So they're asking the question, what is the source? And they're staying away from the one answer that makes the most sense. But what about for you? Where does this Bible stand in your life? And by our actions, we can easily state, well, Pastor, I really don't know. It's a good book. What else? He asked the Pharisees. He asked the Pharisees if it's from God. Is it from God or is it from man? Now, instead of huddling in your own little groups, think about it for yourself. What place does the Bible have in your life? If it's from God, then jump in with both feet and believe Him. We just read in Hebrews 11, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. By it, what? We believe the worlds were formed out of things that are not visible. There's your explanation for the creation of the universe. Not the balance of matter and antimatter, but the presence of a power that cannot be measured by human instruments. If you believe this book is from God, then follow it. Follow it. Jump in with both feet. Because if your answer is like the Pharisees, I don't know. Right? If your answer is I don't know, then why are you here? Why are you here? Let's commit to it. 100%. There are things in here yet to discover. I can only scratch the surface. I held on to this article for a while, not knowing Lord, what possible use do you have for me, to share this article? And then when I decided I was going to continue Luke 20, continue in our journey through Luke, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. There is actually a connection here. Somewhere, God has a plan for your life. And He has a plan for mine. And why not believe it? There's going to be so much activity in the periphery trying to draw you away. And right here, we read, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created you. And He wants to be a part of your life. Why not let Him in? All the way. Let Him in not just at the gate, not just at the door. Don't keep Him standing at the door. Let Him in all the way. There's so much He wants to show you. And as he shows himself to you, watch as your struggles melt into insignificance. Because he is that big. He is that good. If he has all the power to insert asymmetry into what we believe is a universe that shouldn't exist, he can exercise that same power for you. And he does. He does. Let's give him our trust. Let's give him our devotion. Let's give him our lives. Because he's got an eternity planned for us. Do you want to be a part of that?
Amen.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you that you deal with impossibilities. That, from what our scientists tell us, we should not be here. But Lord, because of you, we are. Because of you, we have hope. Because of you, we have a future. So, Lord, I lift up my prayer for everyone here, especially those who are on the fence about committing their whole lives to you. Lord, you've given us the words of life. So we lay hold upon it today. We lay hold upon you. We trust you, whom we cannot see. Because we see the evidence of your hand here on this planet, here in our lives. And we long for that day when you will make everything right. Thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayers, for knowing the cries of our hearts, for knowing our deepest frustrations. Thank you for the future you have planned. We pray all these things in Jesus' name.